Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name's StepsBasic, and welcome back to my community show. Sort of sounded like a pirate there for a second. Anyway, so I'm making this community show in lieu of further content for the week because, as most of you may know, Halloween is Sunday, and I have a story I have to read for y'all by Sunday. Guess how much I have done so far? I've transcribed it. That's it. Yes, in typical StepsBasic fashion, I am behind schedule again. But that's okay, because we did manage to finish most of what we planned. And I started Observer, so I don't feel so bad about not including it in the month, because it's in the month now, which is good. I just wish I could have not. Part of the holdup was actually that freaking house flipper video. I worked really hard on it, getting to the point where I could just buy the freaking house I wanted to do. And as you saw, when I filmed the video, I still didn't have the money for the house I wanted. So I had to go back and do it again. I had to go back and do that because I don't have House Flipper on my computer at the moment, and I didn't at the time. I had to download it and work my way up to it. And the week I finally put it out, you'll remember, it was just Resident Evil 7 and then one episode of House Flipper, and then that was it for the rest of the week. Yeah, and that's because of that. I was like, I will get this done. I will get it over with. Should only take me a day. And then I can make the video and put it up, and it'll be great. And it didn't. But that's okay. We've got at least one video per day, and then some for the month. So I'm happy with it. But I still have to get this story by Sunday, which is important. But in lieu of nothing, I wanted to give you something today, and that is my community show. We've talked a lot about a lot of things on this channel, and myself included, even though the last couple of years I've kind of nixed the community show in order to have time for the story, I have come to the conclusion that I want at least one from here going forward. Every month, every October, I want to have at least one community show about something a little bit, I don't know, different. And while I talk a lot about a lot of things, this technically still fits into that category. But I wanted to talk about morality. And morality is something that a lot of people don't fully understand. Some people tie it to religion, others tie it to law, and we always fail to understand what it actually means. Now, of course, you can go by the definition of morality, which is, of course, principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong or good and bad behavior. Milquetoast answer. But that idea is pretty set in stone where we think of morality as in, black to white, chaos, order, good, evil. And some of us are fairly adept at seeing the spectrum of it. And then there are others of us who fail to understand the spectrum. They see things only in one or the other. Black or white, good or evil, rather than good to evil, black to white. And that's an interesting concept in and of itself, because can somebody who sees the world in only black and white truly understand morality and how it can be a spectrum? There is a term, morally gray, and this is understood to be when something is neither good nor bad. However, it is also something that can be defined as something that is both good and bad, i.e., I'm starving, I need food, so I steal a loaf of bread. The act of theft is morally bad, but feeding myself, or keeping myself alive, is considered morally good, more or less. Of course, it balances itself even further depending on who you're stealing the food for, i.e., I'm not starving, but that child over there is starving. So let me go ahead and steal this loaf of bread from this baker and give it to the child so the child has food. And it balances the scales a little bit more towards the lighter end of things rather than the darker end of things. And the idea of the morally gray is where a lot of us exist at this point in time, where we think that we can do bad as long as the end goal is good, i.e., the ends justify the means. But what we don't understand is that sometimes we do need to think about the binary involved in the spectrum, i.e. 1 to 2, 1 to 0, as it were, because binary is not 1 and 2s, it's 1s and 0s. I know this because I took an electronics class. Anyway, but what was I saying? Oh, yes. Sometimes we need to understand the aspects of it, because morally gray is a decent place to live. However, we need to understand that even in a morally gray situation, somebody suffers. And sometimes we can feel justified in saying, hey, that baker didn't need that extra dollar for, his family. I can take this one loaf of bread and it balances me out. So I'm stealing for a child, therefore I'm balanced out. However, sometimes it's not that simple. Sometimes the world doesn't understand. First of all, is it considered morally gray if you steal from somebody, even if the intent is good? Now, this goes back to what I was talking about, the people who see black and white. Obviously, if you commit an act of bad, then you are in turn bad. And existing in a state of badness could be, well, bad. I'm very eloquent, as you can tell. But did you ever try talking to the baker? Trying to understand, trying to ask and help them to understand what it is you need? Have you? I don't think so. Because what you saw was a loaf of bread and a starving child. The baker may not have seen the starving child. The baker, who probably turns out dozens of loaves of bread a day, would not mind sparing that loaf of bread for that child. Therefore, what could be a way to balance the scales even further is talking to the baker, saying, hey, Mr. Baker Man, could I get that loaf of bread, please? That child over there is starving and I haven't the money to pay for it. The baker would look at you, then look at the starving child and say like, oh, that is fine. I will give the loaf of bread to the child. Therefore, while you muddled about in the gray, i.e. stealing for a good cause, you have failed to understand that there may have been a different way. And that is one of the problems with society these days, is we don't like to think about the nuance. We do not like to think about the gray. We do not like to think about other options that may be available to us, i.e. conversation. And honestly, I like the chaos. I like the madness. I like the hatred that you are all brewing and creating amongst yourselves just for the sake of I'm bored, or I feel like I need to do the right thing, but I don't know how to do it. Therefore, I must do the only thing I do know how to do, and that is be mean. Understanding how morality works is key to society. It has no actual ties to religion or even legal laws, because there are certain things that we as human beings understand are morally wrong, i.e. killing people. We understand that beyond everything else, to take another human being's life is morally wrong. Now, of course, there are ways to balance the scales, to turn it from a moral wrong to a moral gray, i.e., I don't think any way is going to make the taking of a life balance out to a complete morally light, as it were. But there may be situations where killing a person will balance the scales, i.e., that person lives within the morally dark, ignoring, hating, hurting, killing, and therefore the only way to stop them in their reign of terror is to kill them. Therefore, it stops being a morally dark situation and more of a morally gray. But there is still no right that we as people have to take another life. It is not a morally acceptable thing to do. And this is why people still debate whether or not the death penalty is the right thing to do. I, for one, am for it. I'm not going to lie. As much as I feel that the taking of a life is not in any way morally ambiguous, but very much morally dark, I'm still for it. Because sometimes you have to remember that life isn't black or white. Life isn't I'm good and they're bad. Life isn't if I do this, everything will work out. No. Life is a series of moments built on trying to balance your scale. Trying to, at the very least, leave the world in a somewhat balanced way before you leave it. Because let's face it, none of us have the power to create a good world. None of us individually have the power to lean the balance of the scales towards the light. Because none of us want that power. None of us want to accept that responsibility. And as an individual, none of us can. Because as an individual, we always think somebody else is going to do it. That is, for all intents and purposes, somebody else's problem. Hopefully this has given you a few things to think about. It's certainly an interesting topic, and I find the discussion of universally moral objects to be an interesting, topic. But, as I was saying, thank you all so much for your patience, your consideration, and I'm glad that you all have been along with me on this ride. I will be off for the next few days. I have to do the reading for my story, which I will have up and ready for you on Sunday, Halloween Day. But in the meantime, thank you all so much for joining me for this episode of The Community Show. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you did, please go poke that like button for me. If you'd like to see more from me, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and of course, as always, you're more than welcome to leave a comment in the comment section down below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can, when I can, if I can, all that jazz, and tune in next time, when I will be gone, and the regular StepsBasic will be back. But anyway, until then.